Y yo quería comentar dos cosas puntuales. Yo cuando al final de los 90, cuando estábamos en nuestra formación académica, pues en una conversación informal, ¿no?, con un profesor, pues nos comentó, como decía, se está hablando ahora de unos ciertos temas, ¿no?, como que eran lo que discutíamos en ese momento, ¿no? Y nos comentó ese profesor, va a aparecer como un nuevo, no que va a aparecer, sino que de pronto va a destacar un nuevo concepto que es la sostenibilidad. Y eso va a revolucionar como el mundo de la arquitectura. Eso lo comentaba, nosotros éramos estudiantes y la verdad que nos sonaba un poco extraño, ¿no? Aunque sí aplicáramos términos de sostenibilidad, pero sin definir un contenido como muy claro. Pues 10 años antes, Mario Cucinella era ya formaba parte de ese inicio, de toda esa dinámica arquitectónica que abogaba o apostaba por estos temas. De hecho, a principios de los 90 ya presentó para el RIVA un proyecto, un concurso que ganó, donde en los desiertos, el desierto de Egipto, pues desarrollaba una serie de asentamientos para... ¿Se entiende? I don't speak English.
No, es fine, no.
Donde... Entonces ya desde esta propuesta de principios de los 90 planteaba unos asentamientos en los desiertos con la intención de producir o gestionar el agua, ¿no? Un tema que hoy es primordial en todo planteamiento urbano que vamos a desarrollar. Y él casi iniciaba ya su carrera profesional, o sea que no es como una arquitectura que se ha unido como a estas nuevas tendencias, sino que él fue partícipe de generar esa tendencia, ¿no?, de arquitectura. Y luego, sobre su arquitectura, comentar otra cosa, otro tema que yo creo que es interesante, en una frase de Iñaki Ábalos, que casi puedes representar en España como el símbolo de la sostenibilidad, la termodinámica, de toda esta... Y él hablaba de la belleza termodinámica, ¿no? Pues yo creo que Mario Cucinella es como el ejemplo de que toda esta conducta, todo este movimiento sostenible y medioambiental es capaz de generar una belleza, ¿no? Y lo podemos ver en su obra. Y con esto yo doy la palabra al maestro, ¿no? Muchas gracias.
No hablo español. Can I speak in English? It's fine. Well, thank you very much for your introduction. I just remember this project in 1990. It was like 1,000 years ago. No? There was a competition for United Nations. That's not a lot of time ago. So before starting to present my work, I would like to tell you a little story, because I think all the debate on sustainability is interesting because we can rebuild the bridge with our past. Because the story this story I'm going to tell you is from the ice cream from Marco Polo to the new post-carbon era. So it's coming from far away. But there are thousand years where there's no energy. And architects and people were dealing with climate, with no technology. Now the idea is the next post-era is no carbon, so no fossil fuel. How we can design better our building with little energy. So, and I tell you this story because if you read the book Il Milione, is the famous trip of Marco Polo, when this Marco Polo was in Persia, in the middle of the desert, the people, in sign of welcome, they give to him an ice cream, tamarind ice cream. I say, how the Persian people make an ice cream on 12th century in the middle of the desert? So I think it's a question that needs some answer. Why, how they was able to do it? And they was able to do because they built these buildings, and I show you in this little diagram called Yakchal. and coal is a house of ice. There was in many countries there all this idea of conservation of water, conservation of ice. So they built a big wall looking south, and the wall protect a little pool, which is number one, behind. And in front of the wall there was a big tank with a dome. So what the Persian people did is putting water on this pool in the night. So during the day, all the pool was under shade because the solar angle in the winter time is lower. So what happened is, because the sky is minus 55, 50 degrees, for the effect of the radiation of the sky, so the water was frozen in the night. And Persian people every night in the winter time was able to make layers of ice and then put the ice on the tank and cover the tank with straw and conserve this ice all the summer. So the people was in a very extreme climate. They was able to make this called faludesh. It's an ice cream with tamarind and pistachio in the middle of the desert. Then if you read the story, Persian people was able to make ice 400 years before Christ. So it's a long, long tradition. And this tradition I like to call empiric innovation. So they try for centuries, to make things until they find a solution. And then without any technology, only with the empirical. I try and I'm doing and try. So for me, this is this is beautiful. Maybe we can switch off the lights, which is the dome, and that's the size of the tank. So you can see the dimension of these things is huge. So the powers of these things is amazing. And that is, this is the area of Iraq, Iran. So the wars is almost demolished and bombing everything. So this is a few buildings remain. But I like this idea of looking the past, not in nostalgic way. I'm not nostalgic of the past, of course. I'm looking for futures, make more buildings, and make new innovation. But I think sometimes it's also important to rebuild this bridge with the knowledge. Not from we don't want to make building as before, but the knowledge. We have 2,000 years of knowledge how dealing with climate. We know, so I think it's good time to using again. And then this is a phrase I like a lot. Because we must get used to the idea. At the most important crossroad of life, there's no sign. So that's the life. You need to make a choice. But the choice in front of us, there's no choice. So there's no crossroad. It's very clear the line where we need to go, and that starts from 1992. But these things start much before. But from 1992, the famous Rio de Janeiro Conference of the United Nations on climate change, and then for 21 years until last December, with the COP21 in Paris. Every year the United Nations make a conference about the climate change. Then the German make a lot of works on passive house, a new regulation, then the LEED certification for the United States. So every year, more and more, we have very clear what is the direction. And then Euro 2020, so the objective from Europe about the 20% less of consumption, 20% more of renewable energy, 20% less of CO2. So, and then Europe launch again the 2030. So the objective is coming, more far. If you're looking on the internet, this architect called Edward Mazzaria, U.S. Architecture 2030. How can build in the United States CO2-free district in cities? And then the European Roadmap 2050. So that's quite clear. Architecture is in this timeline. We play a fundamental role. As you know, 50% of all energy produced is consumed by buildings. So if we don't work in buildings, we're not going to save the problem. So that's why I think architecture, architects, engineers, and all this idea of sustainability in buildings is very important. It's a key solution for the future. And that is the European 2030 framework for climate change. It's a very ambitious plan. Minus 40% of CO2 emission, 27% of renewable energy, less consumption of energy. So all these things looks like, looks like far away from architecture, but in reality, I mean, all the work we need to do to reach that numbers is mainly related to how we can renovating our building in the cities, how we can improving the policy of transportation. So there's a lot of things with regarding architecture. And then that's, I think, is the most ambitious plan for the next 3 years. How we can design building called NZBED, like nearly zero energy building. So how we can design this kind of building. There will be an obligation in 2019 for public buildings and should be compulsory for all the market in 2020. So this is open a scenario I think is completely different in terms of knowledge. Our architects are ready to this challenge. That's the point, because this is not only a question of creativity. This is how you can match tools, knowledge, and creativity. So which will be not an easy task for this short time. So, but of course, it's not only a CO2 problem. That would be too easy. All the effort we do now in this moment and all the discussion in Europe about the energy is mainly to make our life more sustainable, how we can live better in our city. The city is very important for the future of Europe. It's the place where everything happens, but we want to live better. We want to live in a more safe place, a more clean, less pollution, less traffic, better buildings. And so that is just the frame, and I think I very insist to the idea that, of course, the future is the only place where we can go, because that's the past easy because we can see. You can see the past. It's the very place comfortable, because everything already happened. You can look, you can make again. But the key point is the present. How you can design this present. How we can bridge that past to design that future. So I think sustainability is that thing. Is reconsidering the knowledge of our past and design our future. So that's I think is the most challenging things. And regarding this, I did few projects in the last years, and as we said in the beginning, I started my office in 1992 in Paris, and then I thought it was good from the beginning of my work. Then sustainability is not an option. It's a part of the history of architecture. Design building and a place, good buildings, a building where you can feel comfortable. So I think all these things is part of the history of architecture. So I did these buildings last year after an earthquake in close to Bologna. So this is a kindergarten built after the earthquake for a region close to Bologna. And there are a few simple considerations in schools. I'm very involved on design schools because I think, especially in Italy, I think we built the last school 25 to 30 years ago. So I think there's a lot of work to do now. So I say, student learning more in a well-designed classroom. That's interesting. I say, well, looks banal. I say, of course. But when you look at the buildings where we study, it's not always like this. Or design has a positive effect on learning and education. Interesting this, because I come from the country of designers, and our school are not really made with these things. Quality of design have a positive effect on people. And this one I think is most interesting. The comfort conditions are parallel to the level of the attention and the learning. So you better design your building, better is the level of attention and learning. So why we design building then is not comfortable and not well designed if they are made to learning. No? So I think this is simple consideration showing then how much work is necessary on design, because design buildings for schools is a very high responsibility, because building is the first level of education. A good building already tell you something, is express the quality and the dignity. And just to give you an example, because design this building make me my memory something that I totally forgot. And I was remember my kindergarten. So I said, why I remember my kindergarten? 4 years old, we are in the province of Milan. I was with my family in this small city, and I still in my memory very clearly the place of my kindergarten. So I full remember this wall, which was small and was like embracing the children, creating a protecting space. And then there was 2 small classrooms, a lot of daylighting, and I still remember the day when there was too much lighting in. And then Discovery was designed by a modernist architect from Bologna, and then was very well known in Rome and Naples, Giuseppe Vaccaro, and he was a very young architect. At that time, we are 1960. He designed this building in 1957. I was in this kindergarten in 1964. So they come in my memory because that's showing that buildings, they don't move, the building doesn't move, but they travel in the memory. So it's a part of your story, part of your life is your emotion coming from buildings. So especially for schools, it's very important because children, they learning in the first 3 or 4 years, they start to understand the world. If you design a building where they have a relationship, you can creating a memory. So, and maybe I like to thinking that I'm an architect because I was in a very good and nice kindergarten. So we designed this building from a story of Pinocchio, I think you say that in Spanish. And Pinocchio is a very dramatic story, I don't know if you read it. It's not really funny, it's a very sad story. And I was keeping this picture, take me really, I was very interested about these pictures, reading the book. And if you know the story, then Pinocchio was eaten by the whales, and Pinocchio and his father was lost inside of the whales. They take it 2 years, they find each other. So if you read the piece of literature, it was fantastic. And I thought, yeah, of course, this is a dramatic picture, but in the same time, it looked like the womb of a mother. It's like you inside of a belly. And from this, this was the first sketches we did, and then we built this, which is a full wood construction buildings. It's built with 2 materials, wood and transparent glass, and was designed by this kind of layers, one after the others, and full transparent. There's no walls between classrooms, only transparent glass. And of course, it is made on the plain of Po. Was in the plain of Italy, between Turin and Venice. There's nothing happens. It's like a flat sea. The only things happens are trees, very regular, and some little tower from church. So the idea of this building was to find again this landscape of all the repetitive elements, very simple, then something that you have in your eyes. And done technically by a system very simple, build this element in wood, and then 70% of the building is opaque and very well insulated, and facing on south, and it's a small, it's simple, and also eating on the floors and a little ventilation. Recuperation of the rainwaters, producing heating for heating the buildings, solar photovoltaics for the electricity. All these things are invisible. You don't see that. I don't think So I think it was a little mistake in the last years of using photovoltaics as an expression, no? Because photovoltaics is a very terrible piece. No? It looks terrible, no? And solar panels looks like a washing machine. No? It's terrible. Putting in the buildings, I don't think that was an aesthetic of sustainability. You know? And I like the building as sustainable, but I don't like to using that as the aesthetic of sustainability. You know? So everything is invisible. What I like is the space. You know? So, and of course, this diagram, which is very simple, is a part of the pedagogic program of the school. So teaching to the kids these things, very simple. No? If the sun is not only light with energy, the water is not only something that you can use, but you can do something else. So I think that's why I'm saying buildings are really the first level of education. And also we use in parametric design, and I think for us was a very good experience of design this, I say in English, in Italiano would be this portali, these are like doors, portali. And we send our drawing directly to the machine of the Rubner company, was the factory, and they cut all the piece from the office to the machine. There's no anything in the middle. No? I think all these ideas of parametric design and new tools has make our life a little bit easy, And then they built 25 of these every week. In 4 weeks, all the building was up, and it takes 6 months to finish. And of course, it looks like this kind of a construction. And it was very important to go fast because kids need to go to schools after the earthquake, because if you have kids, then they like the rhythm of life. If you make something change on their life, it's something strange for them. So we start this project in October, and then we finish in the summertime. And next September they went all to the school. And it was an event, I think it was very important for the community, and it was a long discussion with the teachers, because I'm always said we design school for the others, not only for ourselves. And it was the pictures, and that's the buildings finish. And then we discovered that the kids, they start to play with these floors, because it looks like they can play by using toys and things, and yeah, it was funny. Oops, sorry. This is the laboratory, and there was a teamwork with teachers and parents, because school, especially in our countries, all the family is really attached to school, because you leave your kids to the school and then collect the kids after 10 hours, 8 hours. So I think one point was very clearly 100% security in terms of earthquakes, and 100% security in environmental point of view in terms of material. Because kids, they touch everything, but also they leak everything. So I think you have to be careful about the material for them. And then we work with this group. We're creating a group of young architects called Laboratorio di Arquitectura Partecipata, and we work with them and talk with students, with families, and with the teachers, a series of workshops. And I think it was also a way to put in together the buildings. When the buildings arrive, it was already shared with everybody. I think that's make things much easier. And then the kids start to play with the building. And that's in the night. And this is the project we did for ARPA, which is the Agency for the Protection and Prevention of the Environment. It's a public building, this one. The story of this building is very long. I'm not sure in Spain things working like in Italy, but I won that competition in 2006, and I maybe finished this building this summer. So it took me 10 years to do it now, because it was complicated and difficult, and it was the companies fail, so there was a really complicated things. And I'm always saying in Italy, if I make one building every 10 years, I have another 2 buildings, and then I'm finished my career. That's really quite complicated. And that's, I show you this picture because that's the idea to build this bridge with our past. I don't want to make something like this, but these people, they have very high knowledge about ventilation, and ventilation, as you know, is a complicated thing to study. It's not like daylighting. Ventilation and how the air movement, all these things is complicated. So we need the tools. But then for centuries they was able to ventilating this whole building in mud and cooling the building on the night and get back the energy they collect in the night during the day, and reducing the temperature of the building during the summertime for 8 to 10 degrees. So that knowledge is interesting. And when I did this project, it was started by some consideration about the climate. We are close to Bologna, in a very humid and hot climate in the summer, and very humid and cold in the winter time. So not exactly the best place in the world. And what we did is creating this roof, 120 chimney. Then they bring light through the buildings, so all building is in natural light, and in the same time the chimney working as a chimney effect for ventilating the buildings. So that is the diagram, so all the chimney, and 2 strategies are, oops, that's the building, is all in wood construction, take a lot of time, but in reality this is a building that you can build in maybe less than 1 year, so if you want to do quickly. And that is the passive strategies. Of course, as a public building in Italy, you cannot do a public building only with passive strategies. You need to make all the technical service and everything. But interesting enough, in the winter time, the chimney is working like a glass house, so they're collecting the warm air on the top, and with the fan we mix the air. And in the summertime it's working on the other way around, so when it's too hot, the chimney was open on the back, and the chimney effect suck air from the chimney from the garden and ventilate the building. Of course, that's not enough. When there's 38 degrees and 90% of humidity, you don't want to open the windows, you want to keep everything out. So that's working mainly in the middle season, and like in the beginning of the winter or in the beginning of the summertime. But it's already by the form of the building you're creating performance. I like this connection between form and performance. And of course there are tools of analysis. This is something that we do in the office. We don't do all the detail. We work with engineers, of course, but part of the office in time, dedicating time to environmental analysis. So there are 2 architects. They come from a PhD in sustainable design, and they do preliminary analysis on our building. I think for us was very important, starting on the preliminary stage with architects who was dealing with this analysis. This is CFD, but we do also simplify analysis on daylighting and energy performance. So it's the beginning. But then we work, of course, with engineering, with companies, and detailing. But I like then when we are starting, because mistakes are made in the beginning. How you design a building, the first thing you do, then if it's wrong, it's wrong. And then you can add technology, you can do something, but when it's wrong, it's wrong. So there's nothing, technology may be solving 50% of your problems, but no more than that. So that's why we work in the beginning to make some analysis to adjust the buildings, and then, of course, we are not engineering, we work with them. That's the model in our workshop. And then we still do something analogic. I'm not, I said today, I'm not a digital native or native digital. I'm coming from analogic era, and we do something like this is an artificial sky where you do analysis of the quality and the quantity of light inside of a model, no? And it's interesting because it's a learning process. You're learning by doing, no? And this is in Turin, and you can analyze every hours of every day. In this case is March and June and December, so the high sun, the middle sun, and the low sun, and see what happened in the room. No? And I think this is important also for the office, because the young architects, they do in the laboratory, they try to see how much the intensity of light change when the lights come in. And of course you can do that by digital, of course, but I think for us it's still important to do things by hand, to do it. And of course you can do like this is a radiance program to see the intensity of light and in the exposition of your office. And that was done because in another project, in another competition, that was done in France. The competition was the government say we want a quantity of lux as a medium in the office for all years of 400 lux of natural light. So if you do that kind of a brief, you need to really working hard on tools to understand how you can do it that. No? And this is almost finished. This is the roof, the technical service for the laboratory, and corridors, and this is the external, all this chimney. So interesting enough, at this stage, which is almost finished, is the light inside is much more than the light outside, because it's all the chimney reflecting the light, so it's a kind of very stable and volumetric light is quite good. That's the chimney. And then that is the results in terms of CO2 emissions. So having the buildings help the performance, and then if the performance and help are related to the shape of the buildings, of course you need less energy, but you need less machine. So it's the balance between what is passive, what is active. No? And I think this is the balance also for what we define sustainability. No? I think we need to reconnecting the building with the climate, and then using technology to reach that level of comfort, but not only by machine. Then we are on site with this building in Aosta, which is close to the French border, and it's the first building in Italy by this definition by Europe, a nearly zero energy building. No? So high performance building with low demand of energy, and the energy you need to be made by a renewable source, no? Which are different kind of source, and that's the balance. No? So for us it was very difficult, because make a building with this condition is not an easy. It's not easy to starting and understand how these things work. You need a lot of preliminary work on analysis. Oh, sorry. And it's also interesting in Italy. There's a discussion about reusing existing buildings. Now, this is a military base, very close to the city center. Aosta is a Roman city, so these buildings, this military camp is close to the Roman wall, and is now transforming in a university. You know, it's happening in other cities in Italy. Then the big military camp will be transforming in public function, library, university, laboratory. You know. So this you can see from the other side are the vegetable garden of the city of Aosta, and that is also the wall, the Roman wall of the city. You know. This is the existing one, which is keeping, of course, as a library, and this is diagram of the two wings, the new wings of the university. That's the plan. So we already start the site for one of these, and the square. So we demolished two existing buildings and rebuilt two new wings for humanistic university. So it's like a piece of ice, so it's a block of ice. and that's the building himself is quite simple. It's a corridor, there's an atrium and all the classroom. They look in east and west. And the buildings is 60% is opaque and massive insulation, and 40% is transparent. So I think also these two numbers are very important if you want high performance. If you want to make all transparent buildings with this regulation, you need to use triple glazing, which is cost a fortune, or using again opacity, insulation, and transparency in a different balance. No? So more insulation, 20% more insulation in the buildings, and optimize the daylighting system and optimizing the cooling and the heating in the buildings. So this is the sketch, and we take the energy, renewable energy, I take by the groundwater, because Aosta was a city of very large industry of steel, which is stopped. So the underground water was a rise. So we're using cool water from the ground for the heat pump, and the roof is a photovoltaics. And that's cover completely the demand of energy of the buildings. This is solar shading analysis, something we do ourselves. And also, as you know, especially for this kind of building, the innovation is, of course, in the buildings, in the way it's built, but part of the innovation is the using the tools, you know, how you can design a building with this shape with in a way that you'll be able then to build. You know. So we're using Grasshopper for this project to optimize the shape of all the elements, and the idea of these layers of the buildings, you know, this is very massive, compact, you know, it's coming from this idea that these lines is corresponded at one night and one day. You know. The night, the line is frozen, it's ice, and during the day it's snowy, and then frozen and snowy. So that's why you have all this line. You know. And that is the way the building's made. We have a very large workshop in the office. We do a lot of modeling. So we're working with 3D, of course, but I still very, I don't know, we make a lot of models in big scales. So the reduction of CO2 emissions. And that's what will be, so we do now this one is already out of ground, and next one will be in the next 2 years. And that's this kind of model we do. You can see from this facade the opacity and the transparency. You know. Of course, the problem is if you want to increase the opacity because it's more performant, then you reduce the daylighting. So you need to balance these two things. You know. And that's the detail of these buildings. And then 2 years ago we won that competition in Algeria, and it was a strange competition because we do a competition in any place, but in Algeria we pushing to say, well, we want to try to make a more efficient building in Algeria is a country of the biggest production of gas and some oils also. So it looks like they don't need these things. But in reality, also the country with a lot of gas and oil, so it's not easy transforming the gas and oil in energy. No, it's not so simple. And especially in the last 10 years, the Algerian economy is booming, no? And they build a lot of buildings. The Algerian city is coming bigger and bigger, and then it's a crazy place. No? It takes 4 hours driving from the airport to the city center. So traffic jam, impossible. It's pollution, very high level pollution. Building completely out of context. They need a huge amount of energy for cooling. So I think they're facing now, in some countries, they're facing then, if you make a wrong model for that climate, it will cost a huge amount of money, and then maybe you not reach the level of comfort, and then you're also creating a problem for the environment. So these two things was part of the consideration of our project, and we proposing the idea to make like a dune, and then the building is actually this one. It's like two semisphere connecting like a musharabi, like a filtered light, and coming from the shape of the arch. And then these buildings considering two things. If you make a building looking south, in this case that was the plot of the land, we have one facade completely south, but the problem is not really the south, it's the east and west facade, because you get, especially in the summertime, you have all the morning in the east time, and you have all the evening the sun in your buildings, and especially in the winter time when the angle is lower, then you have, maybe temperature is not very high, but you have the sun very powerful coming through the buildings, and that you need to cool in the building in the winter. That is the problem. So the idea is this sort of a musharabi is a filtered light, and the south face is a sort of a canopy with photovoltaics, but it's an open. So then we increase the ventilation on the south canopy to bring all the air to the top of the buildings. And that was the idea, the empathy. I say in the beginning, creative empathy was the idea of what we are working on, because empathy is, as you know, is the way you try to find relations with somebody else. You're empathic with your partners. You're empathic with people. And then to be empathic, you need to listen, and you need to creating this relationship. That in the context of buildings, empathic is for me get information, understand the place where you're working, and the creativity, of course, is a tool. Very important. Sometimes can be careful. We need to be careful because it can be extravaganza. Creativity with no lines can be anything. So put the empathy with creativity together. Maybe you can using creativity in this direction. So this is the scheme of the building. The roof, the south facade as a big canopy of the big atrium, so ventilating inside of the building on the south. We make this sort of eyes from the south to bring light in the middle of the building to the north side, and then the skin, the external skin. So that's the map. This is a model just to show the elements. That's the yellow one is really, we try to bring the light from the south through the building because it's very wide, especially on the ground floor. And that is the picture of what will be. So we are now finalized. Italy is complicated. I'm not sure Spain is so complicated like Italy, but Algeria is very complicated. So it's whenever I'm training to be living in a complicated country, I think they make me. Our passion is very, very tough. But we get planning permission after 2 years, and now we started the final drawings. And this is some study on the facade, because the facade is curved outside, but in reality inside is the glass are vertical. Make a sort of a balcony on each floor, then be easy to clean. We are in an area where sometimes this kind of stormy sand coming from the desert and make everything pink colors, the colors of the sand. So you need to be very careful about materials and possibility of maintaining the buildings. The detail of this facade. And now this is our new adventure in Italy, in Milan. We made a competition last year, it was like in summertime, and we won the competition to make a tower in Milan. I don't know if you know the latest news in Milan. They built in the center of Milan a sort of a business district, but not like in other countries outside of the city center. This is really in the city center. Cesar Pelli made this tower, the big one. And then the last bit of this development was this tower, and this is a part of the study model we did for the project. And the project is about, just give some aspect of methodology. So the tower is the final buildings on this complex, and was designed with two considerations. One, the main facade will be in the south face, which is a problem. And what we did, we opened the south with a big atrium, so it's a 120 meter high atrium. Then it's coming like a climate moderator from the buildings, and was some urbanistic problems. So this is our building, this one, and that one. And it's a sort of a digrid. And the effort we do now is do all the buildings in transparent glass, not painted, not tainted, very transparent. It's a double facade, so it's and you can see from the shape, all the south face is an atrium, is open. No, it's like a void, and on the east facade, the building is coming up, and like the wind, creating a sort of effect of a skirt. No, is the wind push the facade up and create a canopy, and that should be one of the new piazza in Milan on this district. And that is the atrium. So the idea is all this space is empty for all the floors, and it's interesting working with the engineer the engineer Derns from Copenhagen, and the interesting this is we call a climatic moderator, because in the summertime the temperature inside is no higher than outside, so we're using this as ventilating atrium to bring all the heat from the office. And in the winter time there will be warm air inside of this atrium, and part of this warm air will be exhaust, but part of this air will be recuperating by the system of heating, and we take this air from the atrium to heating the buildings. So in the other hand, avoiding to be very close to the facade on the south, we can have office very close to the edge. So, and there will be a sort of an internal panorama of the buildings. So that's the way it works, as an atrium, classic atrium, and from the top floor we collect this heating air and bring inside of the system of heating of the buildings. And that's what will appear on the south face on the night. So some sketches and some of these. I think what's very interesting of Milan project is they made in some cities this business district, which is interesting. But I think in Milan it was very successful because they built this connecting with the existing city. We are not in a historical center, but are close to the part of the city close to the station. And the fact that we are creating piazza and square and connection is make this contemporary area very successful in terms of urban design. And this is one of the piazza, as I told you. This is study model we do in the office to understand the study of the towers and the atrium, the gardens, and the system of structures and the skin. This is the office, and I'll show you another project every time. See, 10 minutes. And this is a project we finished in Ghana, Africa. We are on the almost tropical area, and this was the first model we made after the trip in Ghana. There was one simple consideration. Ghana solar path is very different from where I'm living. In Italy you have 78 degrees angles maximum. In Ghana you have almost the 90% of angles, so the suns go up very quickly in the morning and it's horizontal all the time and then drop very quickly in the evening. So the problem here, and especially for the climate, is the temperature of the air is almost in a comfort zone, apart of specific period of time, but it's between 23-25 degrees, so it's fine. The problem is the sun is too hot, but if you are under shade, you get all the benefit of the temperature of the air and not from the heating from the sun. So if you make a cantilever floors and shading of your buildings, you reduce the demand of energy only by making this choice of the 50% of what you need, because all the glass are on the shade. There's no facade. There's no solar gain. And then, there are many things to say about the shape, but I was also interested. If you go in Ghana, you see everything is done by hands, and buildings are done by hands as many places. But here, really, you can really see the works, and the beauty of many things is done by this imperfection. Sometimes beauty is really an imperfection. And I thought, because it's complicated work in these countries, maybe if the floor are not exactly on the same line, if somebody make a mistake, nobody see that. But then it was very complicated to make things imperfect more than perfect. And I show you the buildings. There's some pictures of reference. There's some rendering, but then there's the solar part. You can see the diagram. So the sun is very high all the time, all the season, and that's the passive cooling strategy. If you undershade, you still have for a long period of time a very good air comfort zone, and that's the principle. And as the buildings is with floors shading all the terrace and an atrium where you can ventilate, because as using in many housing and many buildings, especially the last century, they're using these glass louvers, so you can moderate in the louvers and increase the ventilation. That was working perfectly, and that's what we did in the atrium. And that's the strategies of solar shading. Okay, and that's the buildings. And you can see from these pictures the sun is not here, and so you can see the shading. So you can also using a transparent glass with no performance, because they don't need relation with the performance of the glass. And the most important part of the work here was on the design stage, because the building was made very traditionally, so everybody using concrete, everybody know how to use steel for make concrete. That's the base of almost in the world. Everybody, all the company, they know how to dealing with these two things. And so we did this. This is just a typical floor, because the columns pushing horizontally. So you need the floors as elements just to keep this force. And then from the beginning of our sketch, it was really complicated. With all element difference, we're using this. We optimize the families of the different elements, and then in the end, we was able to make different lengths of pillars, only 6 different elements and 200 different nodes instead of 608. So this is the optimization by using a parametric design. And then all the work was mainly on the tools, because in terms of technology it was quite simple. It's the way we design and the way we prepare some of the elements to help to make these buildings. It was funny enough, because the traditional modern building in Ghana is a pink, blue, or reflecting glass. That's the idea of a contemporary architecture. So when we did this building, before putting the glass, they thought it was a parking, because they say there's no windows, there's no facade. Now I think it's become one of the landmarks of the city, because they understand there are some connection with the culture of the place. There's Fernando Guerras make these pictures. And just to give you an idea. And of course, the mass of the building is working as part of the comfort of the buildings. And then the atrium, you can see the atrium. There's a panels fixed, full glass, and every one panel is the one with louvers. Because it's a very, very simple. If you go in this place and you're feeling really what happens, it's always breeze, and just enough to open the windows and open the vent, and all the office that will be, for more than half of the time, the building is free running. But the interesting thing is, in Ghana, oil has the same cost of here. The oil costs the same, and electricity costs the same, because producing electricity by oil costs the same. So you have a building with using ventilations or mechanical ventilation only for half of the time is a big saving money. So that's, I think, whether the money is big or not not big numbers, the fact the building is reacting with the climate and try to get the benefit for the climate and using technology for a part of this, I think is it's a good thing to do. This is the concrete. Very brutalist. It looks like buildings in Brazil. The Brazil building in modernist time. It's very hard concrete. That's the context. And then I want to tell you a little other story which is interesting, just to finish this presentation. It's a story about Galileo Galilei, the astronomer, and sorry for the Italians, it said qui è rinchiuso Eolo, re del vento. Eolo is the king of the winds. And all things, the story starts, if you read the biography of Galileo Galilei, it's interesting because he was a funny guy. He was a party man, so he went to a lot of party, and he said, I'm enjoy to go to this party in this villa. This is villa in Vicenza. It's not Palladio, but it's on Palladio style. And also Palladio was one of the guests of this family. And then he tells the story that one day it was a big party and get a lot of food and drink, and it was too hot, and they tried to find a fresh place to stay. And then they discovered then on the first floor of the buildings there was a grid on the floor where air fresh coming out of the floors. And this happened because the villa was attached to a hill where there was a sort of a cave. This cave containing, the air is more humid and fresh and is dropping down, and then come up inside of the villa, and also in the garden. So from that grid, which is today still exists as a restaurant, so if you go, you get the same experience. From that grid is fresh air coming up and cooling that floors. And I was funny the idea then. They try to make the best from the place where they went. Just put the villa there or there. We put in there because we're connecting with these things and get the benefit of nothing. This free energy and free cooling. But then the story is interesting because there also this cool air, which is heavy. It's just running on the garden, and make this garden, especially in the afternoon, very cool. And then ladies went to this party because it was a little bit as, how to say in English, it's a place with ghost, because, women at that time have a very big skirt. So your legs are 36 degrees, and the hair moving on the grass is maybe 25, 23. So what happens when the hair go inside of the skirt is coming up like a chimney, and looks like some invisible man touched the legs of the woman. So, and all this narrative, literature is coming from a simple consideration of empathy, how you connect these things. And so that's interesting. There's a plenty of story. I'm sure Spain must be full of the story of how people dealing with climate and building. I mean, maybe you know, I don't want to tell you something that you know already, but the what's the name? In Granada, come si chiama? L'Alhambra, no? L'Alhambra is interesting. I will show you many years ago some pictures of this humid garden with fountains, and some other garden are dry, no? Because it looks beautiful, no, in terms of landscape, no, this the sound of waters. But the ideas behind this is because if you have different kind of temperatures in garden, with water more humid and cool, and with no waters and hard pavement, the temperature between the two is very different, and air moving through. So they're using this design to cool and move the air inside of the building. So that's what I'm interested to find again, or why we lost that knowledge. Because that was in south of Italy. There's a place where they using the same technique, and they putting in the summertime, the main room of the owner of the house was between two gardens, two courtyards, one humid and one dry, and the air passed through the grid of the facade, and they'd be perfectly cooling, and also when it was 45 degrees. So all these things is knowledge, but also is design, it's beauty, because Alhambra Garden are fantastic. But then behind that, there was an idea, so not only aesthetic, but performance. And then I think all these things will be very interesting, especially if we go in the direction the next generation of building with zero energy. I think we need to find some solution on that area. And then, just to finish, last 2 years ago, we found this school called SOS, School of Sustainability. Is a message also. SOS is almost an emergency. It's time to moving fast on this direction. And the idea was mainly because there are some evident change, and also change in paradigm, change in tools. So everything is changing the last few times, and ambitions are much higher than the reality. We have a lot of ambition to make sustainability, and then the reality is not exactly this. So to bridge that gap, I think we need to help the young generation after university. This is orientating as a postgraduate to two main pillars. One is the vision. Why we need to work in this issue? Why it's so important to work in the vision of 2030 and get more a vision like more humanistic? And the other one is tools, because we are architects. So we make this 4 course called Architectura as a Social Business, and is more related to the urban regeneration. The other one is post-carbon architecture, how we design building in a post-carbon era. Right for a shelter is the idea of working on social housing. And blue design, which is a part of the idea of working with designers of design for ecology. I'm not going to tell you anything, but we have started last year. We already made 2 semesters, and the idea is give to these young architects the opportunity to see the complexities of the problems. So there are people coming to talk, like climatologists, anthropologists, ecologists, different people, to give you the most wide possibility to understand the sustainability and the ecology problems. And the other hand, we do teaching them from the office tools, like how you can simulate internal performance, how you can do daylighting analysis as an architect, not as an engineer. So we give them tools to understand the design in sustainability, and then we working with some in these 2 years we are working with the government agency for the what can I say in English? The government, the state is own a lot of sites in Italy, like military camps, or buildings or industries. We work to them to develop in this area because the market is difficult, but I think the problem is to analyze the potential, ecological potential of an area, the social impact of an area, and then looking for the profit. But if you need to step this into a different scale. And this is the office. We're just moving on October in a more comfortable space. And that's it. Thank you.